Sahana Vavatu Sahano Puntu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So this is our Vedanta series. I'm sure you have lots of questions.
Yes, Swamiji, I have.
Wonderful. Okay.
I'd like you to talk for a bit about affirmations. And I suppose both affirmations in general in relation to our lives and affirmations linked to our spirituality.
Okay, well, firstly, if we have made a distinction between our life and spirituality, we probably have made an error. Because what we call our life, the only reason why we are living is in our individual specific way to contribute toward an overall destiny of freedom, our own freedom. And so to make a distinction between the secular and sacred would be an error. Whatever affirmations apply to your normal, so-called normal working daily life will also be affirmations for your spiritual life. You can think that the only distinction might be like this, that the deeper aspect of yourself is pure spirit. But you see, anything else is manifested from it. This is the way we have to learn to think. Now, most of our thought, if we analyze it properly, it can be put in the category of negative, even though it seems to be positive. And most of our conversations are with ourselves. When we talk, we're talking and listening to ourselves, even when nobody's there. Supposing we're sitting in the train amidst our own thoughts, thoughts come as a kind of running commentary. And the unconscious mind is always doing that running commentary. And even often it overlaps into dream, a running commentary there, making dreams sometimes problem-solving dreams. And so this conversation has to be turned in a more realistic way, in a more truthful way, and therefore in a more positive way. What makes all our conversations negative? The insertion of a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding is that this world has to be dealt with. This world is a struggle. You see, all of these words, another world, an outside world, an external circumstance, a struggle, all of these fall into the category of negative. Because at the end of the day, no matter what we say or think, when we come to this I, this egocentric position, and view the world as something that we have to deal with from that reference point, then all of that really is to do with improvement, inferring things are not right. All of it is to do with correction, which means things are not right. All of it is to do with wishes, which means nothing is fulfilled. There are hollows and gaps that need to be filled. And so life then becomes a question of dealing reactively with situations that seem to be negative. And therefore our thinking in response to that will intrinsically be negative because we'll be in a defensive, reactive position all the time. So what is an affirmation? Well, there are many positive thinkers in the business circles and so on and so forth who will espouse that affirmations are statements made with proper grammar and syntax and commas and full stops and all the rest of it. But you see, we don't think like that at all. thought is so rapid. One word is enough. And so the key to the affirmations, firstly, is to revise our way of looking at the world in the beginning. Supposing we view this world as an unreality, what does that mean? It doesn't mean it's a dream, but it's definitely like a dream. It has all the characteristics of a dream. Things appear, things disappear, things change. We say that a dream is only a dream. We put the only word in simply because of those characteristics, that things appear, things disappear, things change. And so for some reason or other, we don't apply it to the waking world because we are so immersed and identified with it at the time. And the key in spiritual life is the art of staying tuned to the glory of the divine self or God. And it's a question of tuning then, as I say many times before, when the mind goes off, you tune it back again. And one of the ways of tuning it back is using affirmations. What are these affirmations? Well, if you've done the Enneagram course, I'm not sure if you have done the Enneagram course, but you see, then you'll see that if you go around all the affirmations there, you'll come up with these things. Strong, true, wise, full, free, truth, beauty, goodness, love, harmony, all of these things will come out. But when you affirm these, you're affirming this as quick, positive thoughts which are expressive. It's not that I wish to be strong. Strength is there already, and I'm exerting it. And when I do that, every single cell of the body will vibrate with this quality of strength. We have this capacity within us that what we think resonates immediately on the first environment we have, namely the physical environment. And the physical environment is an electromagnetic system. And that, you see, we don't know where the boundary is of that. But what we know is energy is only one and the same. The great, great genius, really, Nikola Tesla, who Swami Purnananda had the pleasure to meet and befriend. He really was a genius, you know. All the world's electricity supply is all based on his alternating current. And the wireless and so on is all based on the Tesla coil and so on. He really had the ability to see something and recognize in detail how to apply it, not just as a possibility, but his laboratory was simply putting in place all the things that he had thought of and dreamt of. And it was all based on the fundamental principle of the oneness of energy. What we call akasha is electromagnetic field. In it is really a permitting field that allows things to pass through. Radio waves, X-rays, gamma waves, photons, so that we can understand that it was Maxwell who discovered that light, in fact, was part of this whole electromagnetic field. So there's only this one energy, and it's a question of tapping into it. If you're able to take light and increase its frequency, and Tesla tried to do it, but blew all his machines up, then we can generate electricity that we can tap into and regenerate it as the power of light everywhere. So this one energy is a very, very useful concept in one field, prana and akasha. This is what the ancient physicists discovered. So that when you think, that thought is generating, is agitating in an electromagnetic field, and is condensing as our world, the world that we want to face and create affirmations about. And when we say strong, where is that strength coming from? It's also coming from that one unity of understanding, that it is the pure spirit. And the pure spirit is the source of all of these other things. When we tap into these qualities, we're tapping into pure spirit. So then, of course, is the question of mantras. If we can interpret mantra as a protecting thought. So again, this prana, which is described as in Vivekananda's Raja Yoga as psychic prana, in other words, thought. Thought is the most subtle energy that we have. And when we apply it in such a way that we are agitating or stimulating or tapping into the subtle vibrations, then these vibrations manifest back again, as it were, because what we call the world is only a manifested crystallization of 5 subtle elements. And when we understand these 5 elements, we really understood everything. That is why, more or less, at every talk I give, I try to emphasize the understanding of these 5 subtle elements. And according to the Ashtavakra Gita, I'm repeating much of what I've said before. When you understand that everything is resolved back into these 5 subtle elements, then immediately, says the Ashtavakra Gita, immediately you get your freedom. Imagine. So the mantra, and the mantra, of course, given by a guru, a competent teacher, is, of course, the most potent of all of this. Can you explain the 5 elements again? Okay, I'm happy to do so, since they're so important. And there's one more text here. Is it? Let me see, chat. Oh, okay, it's you. Can you explain the 5 elements? All right. So we have to understand the structure. Now, I used to present all of this on a whiteboard. You know that the whole arrangement around the self is described as a chariot. This is described in 2 places, in Kathopanishad and the Bhagavad Gita. So you can imagine an old chariot, ancient chariot, with 10 horses in front, and 5 horses, 5%, the sense organs. When we say the sense organs, we normally talk about the organs that take in information. But then there are corresponding organs that make a playback, that react. So 5 organs, there are 5 organs we interpret the world with: the eyes, the ears, the touch, the taste, the smell. All these 5 things are there. This is our initial contact with the so-called external environment. So called because it's arranged to look like that. Fragments are presented, and we have the capacity to pick up certain aspects of these fragments. And these are not standard organs, because other creatures will have different organs. They'll have different instruments to interpret the world, and for them, the world is interpreted a little differently, mainly because there's an internal move, an internal thrust to sustain our existence. And this is because fundamentally we are existence itself. Naturally, it comes out. And then, of course, so 10 organs of reaction, yes, the hands, the legs, there's the organ of procreation, evacuation, and so on. All of these are reactive things. Taste is one, so it goes on. Now, every creature, including every cell, will have this. There's a science called epigenetics, which says that on the membrane of the cell is constructed in such a way that it takes in what it wants from the environment. Let us say it is, some kind of chemicals. Let us say it is whatever it requires, yes, within the solution which is around it, and it takes them in, and it carefully knows from the electrical connections, if you like, electrochemical reactions, what it wants, what it doesn't want, and filters it through a very complex membrane, a kind of skin. These are its sense organs. And you'll notice all the sense organs are outside the skin. They're on the surface of the skin, our version of the membrane. So these individual cells will look for enzymes, let us say, and then make chemical selections, and that goes to make what's called histones around this complex structure of proteins called DNA, and I'm sure you've all heard of it, made from proteins, whose function is to manufacture proteins and deliver an architectural plan for replication or instruction. That's fixed. But these histones can make switch on, switch off buttons, as it were, can turn instructions on and off. They bind around the DNA and modify it. In other words, the intelligent part of this cell seems to be the membrane, not the DNA. And this whole science is called epigenetics. So we have 10 of these organs for information and reaction to deal with the world and to get information about the world. And then there is the individual interpretive faculty, which we call mind. Now we have 11 faculties which give us an understanding of the world. And of course, we have to have 5 objects that match it. Now we have 16 elements. But these are all compounded variations of things which are subtle oscillating waves, oscillations and waves. And these are mere elements. Tanmatra means just mere elements. These are very subtle. So the most subtle will be called Akasha, translated as matter. And we have energy, prana, works on this matter, but this matter is hardly noticeable because it is in a state of avyakta, that means unmanifested. It is in a state of calmness. It is a field, electromagnetic field, if you like. And when it agitates a little bit, then it creates a different kind of combination. So that the only variation we have in this whole universe is to do with frequency, to do with the velocity of a wave, to do with amplitude, to do with all these varying characteristics within a wave system that makes these variations and differences. And so, unfortunately, also another concept that comes with this is called space. But of course, space is its field. So now, from space or an electromagnetic field comes a kinetic kind of energy, and this we unfortunately call air because it doesn't help us. And this air is called Vayu, and this is kinetic energy, and Vayu spreads everywhere, like wind spreads everywhere, or air spreads everywhere, can be found everywhere. And so this combination, now you haven't lost the preceding electromagnetic field, no, you have incorporated it. And that then varies again, because when you have movement, you have friction, and so you have the next one, which is Agni or Tejas, something that shines. And this now is a kind of radiation, and then that comes into a watery thing, Api, and then that comes into Prithivi, the solidity of earth. Now let me go back again. So Akasha produces all sounds and all ears that catch. And Vayu produces all pressures and all skins that respond to it. And Agni or Tejas represents all forms and all eyes that catch them. And then this, unfortunately translated as water, is all tastes and all mouths or tongues that catch it. And then we have Prithivi, earth, as it's unfortunately translated, which is all smells and all noses that catch it. These are the 5 things. And when all of these crystallize into a localized version of our world, they become the eyes, the nose, the skin, and so on and so forth, and the world in front and the objects and those 16 characteristics that we have. So 16 plus 5. Then on top of that, so we have 21. On top of that, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. One more is all sense of individuality is called all egos. Now we have 22 categories. of things. Now, all of these operate from one single operating principle, because the next thing where these are all resolved into is what we might call cosmic mind, cosmic consciousness. The personal God, we can call it cosmic consciousness, cosmic Christ, cosmic Buddha, cosmic Ramakrishna, cosmic consciousness is the answer to the modern query, what is consciousness? There it is, cosmic consciousness. Only one mind is there. And so this, in modern terminology, is called panpsychism, that everything in its strong version will come from one mind. So this is cosmic mind. That means 23 principles now, and the cosmic mind is born from its mother, as it were, nature itself. And nature is not trees and flowers in this context, no. Nature is the umbrella term for the whole relative world, and it sits there with three functions, with three evolutionary forces ready to erupt. And its first eruption will be that cosmic mind, and it is purely made from the element of purity, sattva, illumination. And this is the impersonal God. This is God of the Muslims and so on. And then we draw a kind of imaginary line there, but these are the 24 principles. And then we have another principle, which is variously called, Vedanta would call it Brahman, the Absolute. Well, the Absolute is pure being, and we cannot understand it as long as we're in the relative world. And when we're in the relative world, we try to relate to it and interpret it, and we come up with God. And then when we understand our real nature, and dive into our source, and experience that unity of oneness, then the whole world disappears. It's as if God was dreaming. And then when God wakes up, then the dream disappears, the world disappears. So these are the various principles, the context of these principles are there. Now, what is the importance of it in practical life? Well, then we have a way of thinking and revaluing the world itself. Instead of seeing the world as something solid, we see it for what it is, vacillating waves, combinations of subtle elements. But these subtle elements are not material. They are divine waves. They are waves of divine glories. They are the angels, if you will. They are the subtle forces that manifest from the cosmic mind, so that when you assert an affirmation, you're doing it from the cosmic mind. You're not doing it from your individual mind. And from the cosmic mind, you're mobilizing these subtle elements and getting exactly what you want. Your daily life is your DHL order that you may have ordered 20 years ago or yesterday or some other time. Timing is not in our hands, but subject to a definite causal law that thought is infallible because the thinker behind it is infallible, and every thought will carry through to its condensed version in this world. And that is what is behind affirmations. When we make affirmations, what we're doing is we're neutralizing the unconscious surfacing of negativity. And we're not doing it when we're in trouble. We're doing it all the time so that we can saturate the mind with positivity, positive thoughts. And positive thoughts, by definition, do not have a first person singular, do not have a future tense. There's no egocentricity in it. And there's no wish to complete something that we assume is uncompleted. So these are extremely important principles which are there for our learning. And I hope I answered your question, both about affirmations and about Tanmatras and their significance and importance.
Thank you, Swamiji.
You see, the what we call difficulties are really just kind of fragments. Things are fragmented or seem to be fragmented. And the secret of life is to understand life in its correct context and not to see them as insurmountable obstacles. Obstacles will always be there, they'll always be encountered. Life is harsh and cruel, and that's a fact of it. If we take it like that, if we say it's a cruel joke against me, but all our scriptures say, you know, there's only one existence. Did you know that? You didn't know that. And these are all, they're not mistakes, they're all fragments. And other fragments will be there tomorrow too. You can't avoid them. And you're only recognizing the reaction to fear and fighting off the fragments. And your question indicates, oh, maybe this is what you'd be doing. Can I find an affirmation to fight off the fragments? But you're not changing the fragments. They will always beat you. So don't fight them. Don't fight them, don't reject them. They're not a danger. So put positive thoughts in at the same time. Tune your mind into the totality. The totality has no fragments. So all this affirmations is to tune into the totality completely. And when you say strong, true, and wise, and full, these are all divine characteristics. And they're all in you. And as soon as you assert them, everything vibrates with them, inside and outside. So continue doing it. And when you repeat your mantra, you're going a step further. What you're doing is you're evoking the totality, dressed up in a certain way, an endearing way, a way that delights the mind. And with the opportunity of delighting the mind, why shouldn't we do it? Why should we think that we are trying to fight off a swarm of bees that are constantly attacking us? It's not like that at all. There's nothing wrong with the fragments. Only you never saw the totality. There's another question here. Thank you. Is there a difference between intellect and consciousness? Yes, there is. So it depends what we mean by intellect. Intellect is one thing, but intellectual is another. Now, when we study the Enneagram, for example, and we have just done it in the UK, there are three sections, as it were, or three apparent divisions within the mind. You can imagine them as three rays of light, if you will, that emanate from a central source. Imagine, let's say, in the center of the heart, there is an incomparable bright light and three beams like quasar beams going in three different directions. Well, for our imagination's sake, we can imagine one going upwards, we can imagine one going outwards, and one going downwards. Let us say we imagine three centers of this. Let us imagine that the center of the upward one is, let's say, in the middle of the forehead. Let's say the center of the other one is at the navel. Let's say the center of the other one is the heart. So the center of pure consciousness itself, that is subjective consciousness, not objective consciousness. That's something I'll have to explain. Pure subjective consciousness is radiating in three different ways. And these are three ways that we require. First of all of us need to play the game, and therefore, if we are not living, we can't play the game. So we're all interested in staying alive. You can't play the part on a stage if you don't arrive for the rehearsal. So we all want to be on the stage. We don't want to be late for the rehearsal, and we all want to remain. And so that aspect we can call life or existence, pure existence. Now, at its most pure level, at its absolute level, as it were, the absolute is described in three ways: as existence, as consciousness, and as bliss. Sat Chit Ananda. And if this is true, and we apologize for giving any description at all, And these are not properties or qualities. I think the other week there was a questioner who asked, why are these, how can these be qualities from an absolute? No, they're not qualities. They are absolute substances. They're existence itself. Consciousness itself. It's not that something is conscious. Consciousness itself. Well, naturally, whatever is there will come out when you add time and space, the fragmenting portion, in other words. And so we can imagine this mind being fragmented, as it were, in 3 different dimensions. And so existence comes out as the will to live. And we can imagine that it is, let's say, around the area of the navel, because that's where we were born. That's our source of life. In that area is your whole cooking section. This is responsible for your assimilation, your digestion, and your elimination. Everything is centered around there. And there's a solar plexus that deals with all of that, and so on. And then you find the heart is there, because if our nature is bliss, then it must come out as pure love. And you can say the next one, therefore, is love. And then the next one will be light. And light will stand for intellect. That means the capacity to decide, to reason, to make executive evaluations. As an executive officer. Now, to understand all of this, we have to understand our processing. So earlier I said we start off with the sense organs. Well, the sense organs have no value unless there's something to see. Painting a picture, well, it's of no value unless we have paints and a scene to paint and all the rest of it. So we have these objects, these fragments that we're dealing with, and we are channeling them through instruments which are catching them, and we have an interpretive faculty. And the interpretive faculty we call mind. Actually, we can make a distinction. We can say manasa, because when we say mind, we think of an overall thing, and maybe we have to change our language a little bit to change our concepts. We have an external instrument called the body. We have an internal instrument called the mind. Let's leave it at that. Well, this internal instrument now is comprised of these 5 sense organs, these organs of information. It's also contained the mind that operates the reactions in an autonomic way, in an unconscious way. It contains everything that we normally think of in the mental field. Except one thing, there's an intellect, what we call buddhi, a faculty which is able to assess the information properly and discern. It's also called, therefore, the discriminating faculty. So let's give a funny example. I think this example was contained in Swami Purnananda's How to Know God. This is his version of the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. So we're in a field. Some object seems to be running. This we register through the sense organs. They report, hey, come on, something is running. Find out what it is. And then that gets a report then to the intellect, which says, oh, it's a bull, or the mind itself identifies what it is and reports to the intellect, come on, something is running at me. We've identified it's a bull from our previous experience. We know what it is. And the intellect has a look at it. And then some other entity inside says, oh, ego is part of the mind, says, oh, it's running at me. And the intellect says, okay, it's time to find a tree. Let's run and find a tree. So that's the kind of processing that takes place. Of course, it takes place so rapidly, we are hardly aware of all these stages. So there are these organs and these receptive faculties and these reactive faculties and so on. But the whole thing comes from consciousness. what makes us aware, what makes us conscious, and what makes us think is because our nature is pure consciousness itself. So we have to distinguish between these words consciousness, conscious, and so on. Now we are all aware of these things, and we're all aware of what is going on in our life and in our minds and so on. And this awareness of existence, self-awareness, this is also called, confusingly, consciousness. But it is an external consciousness. It's an objective consciousness. But behind it is also simultaneously an awareness of this I, this fundamental I, which is consciousness itself as well. And it is from here that we are really operating. So we can say that there's a report from the outside going more subtle to the inside. And not only that, but one law has to be invoked. Whatever happens on the microcosmic level will happen on the macrocosmic level also. It's a very fundamental axiom that is very valuable to accept. You see, if you try to find out, and I mentioned this last night also, whether rice is cooked or boiled, well, you simply take a sample of the rice between your fingers, a few grains, you rub it and you see how waxy it is or how starchy it is, and you know, okay, it's cooked. Or if it's hard, no, it's not cooked, it needs more. You don't have to do it with every single grain of rice. So once you sample one aspect of the universe, you have everything. What applies in one small area applies everywhere. What applies at the single cellular level applies at the multicellular level. And what applies at the multicellular level applies at the universal level also. So let us see. We've just described with all these principles, these tattvas, the universal person, starting with all the sense organs and the world, a crystallized version, the version that is applicable to general relativity. And then we have described the subtle elements, Tanmatras, the world that is described by the quantum world, fundamental underlying oscillations. And then we have said, okay, this is now a corpus, a body. And then what is, where does they come from? It must come from an intellect. And the intellect is the cosmic mind. The intellect of the whole universe is cosmic mind, cosmic consciousness. Cosmic consciousness in this sense. And then where does this come from? It comes from a potentiality. And where does that come from? It comes from a peculiar kind of causation, an apparitional causation. Because beyond that is pure being, described as this Sat Chit Ananda, that when we apply fragmenting conditions, comes out as existence itself, consciousness itself, and bliss in the human realm of self-awareness, capacity to think and decide, the will to live, and the expression to love and to have joy and delight and humor. Now, if there wasn't this connectedness, we would be on the wrong track. But this is all verified, of course, by those who took the trouble to go on an interior investigation, a mystic journey to discover, aha, that is I am that. The Upanishads will declare, I have found that one. So when we have found that one, that's the supreme aha moment that we have. That is, of course, pure existence, pure consciousness and bliss. And it comes out also, you see, as Brahma, or God the Father, or Creator, responsible for projecting an existence, projection of itself. And then the capacity to sustain it, that is to make sure that consciousness pervades and makes rhythm and order within the universe. an intelligent design, if you will, and then the capacity to infuse it with spirit. And the spirit is this Shakti that comes from the auspicious one, and gives us bliss when all our illusion and delusion disappear. It's wonderful. So yes, there is a difference between intellect and consciousness. Intellect is
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you.
Is a product of consciousness.
Yes.
If it wasn't for consciousness, we would not be able to think. Or another way of putting it, we'd not be able to tap into that divine grace which we call thought. See, whatever range we tune into or see, such as worry and fear and anxiety, those things will be supplied to us. If that's what you're shopping for, that's what the groceries will be in your package. You know, the current we don't tune into, that's also there. And so we need to program ourselves to something positive. If you reenact painful scenes, then you can open your eyes and remind yourself that you are in the present age, not in the past. And then you can reenact the scene again. And after that, you can turn around and have a good laugh at it. That's the positive way of looking at it. So in that way, all your fears and other negative emotions will be conquered. This is the equivalent of your positive affirmations. And try to find an excuse or an explanation for it. And give thanks for the problem being there. You see, you can give thanks and maybe make this affirmation or saying, if you like, well, you were there and I climbed over you, so I'm no longer afraid. And you see, after reaching that point where you can say that the kingdom of heaven is here where I stand, then you can say, what is there that I have to retreat from or run away from or try to face? So it's actually unnecessary to retreat from anything. You can always attack the first suggestion. You can always attack the first suggestion of fear. You can say, Lord, lead the way, please. You lead the way. I'll be one with you. I won't surrender to the negative forces. You can make that affirmation. And you can magnify the vision of glory, light, and august omnipresent power which you have within you. All of this, affirmations, requires an affirmative mindset. Because if you say, please give me an affirmation, some fear must be there. What do you want to overcome? If you want to overcome fear, then you put thoughts of God's grace in. You can say, Lord, you are the infallible. So show your glory everywhere. And keep repeating this. When you do that, things will change. It's a train of thinking. Not set affirmations, but based on some prayer, if you like, some prayer connection that affirms the reality of the kingdom of heaven now, here and now, along with the king. Fear is something that you make manifest. And the thing that you fear will always materialize. You will always create the ghost and the demon. You see, there's an exercise I probably have told you so many times that we often do. We create a very sinister scenario, imaginative scenario, and ask you to go through a forest with the pre-instructions. See, whatever you find there, you have to ask, okay, what is your name? What do you want from me? And all the rest of it. And the scenario is that you're going through a dark forest. You can mentally play some sinister music, and you know what happens in unfamiliar territory. There are shapes and forms, and the mind superimposes, it visualizes threats. And you can see all kinds of creatures everywhere. And then you come to a point where standing in your way is the most hideous, threatening monster you can ever imagine. And instead of running away or being mesmerized, kindly ask these questions. Who are you? What is your name? What do you want from me? How can I help you? And a remarkable thing happens, that this sinister thing standing on your way gets transformed into something like a cartoon character or a friend, and the whole thing disappears. And it's what we might call transforming demons into diamonds. So we have to be realistic about all these so-called fears and obstacles in front of us. And when we face them head on, in a realistic way, in a reasoned out way, and with an understanding that actually what is there is the pure, infinite, invisible, standing there with divine grace wishing to flow. And as soon as we do that, all the fears and difficulties and obstacles fall away. And when we practice that, what we're doing is we're creating a much more positive circumstance. Things happen unexpectedly. Some new people come in from here. Some opportunity comes in from there. Some delightful, sudden thing comes in from another place, like that. But the sinister things will still raise up, but now we know how to handle them. Oh, thank you. Thank you for coming. You're giving me the opportunity to transform you and overcome you nicely. And that means I can play the game of life nicely without fear. That's a very valuable key in your practical daily life. See, it's easier to describe this on the board. It's a standard thing. I've done it multiple times. You must remember, isn't it? We start off with the absolute at the top. And then we go through nature or the conditioned Brahman, and then cosmic mind, and then the 5 Tanmatras and egos, all egos, and then the 5 objects, 10 organs, 5 of information, 5 of reaction, and the mind. You can make an additional one. You can say that there is a soul. You can call it Jiva, let us say, that has a choice of 3 relationships with the Absolute. That's called the Absolute Purusha. And we can choose to adopt an adoration standpoint, or we can feel that we are connected with it or one with it. These 3 positions we can take. And that's like tapping into the honey in a bee's nest without disturbing the bees, only getting the honey. Okay. So we'll leave off the session now. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Okay.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you.
Oh.